Hi, I wanted to go over the discussion that I posted. Hi, everybody. I wanted to just go over this idea of different type of style of valuation that's going on right now. And I wanted to start with saying, in terms of fundamental valuation analysis, traditionally, companies have been valued by their cash flows. And that's why this week we've been looking at discounted cash flows. So, with that model, the idea was, hey, if this company is going to be making more and more cash flows, it's going to have a high value. And we saw with companies like Starbucks or GE back in the 90s that, if you have negative cash flows, you can still have great earnings and discount cash flows won't work. That's just one weakness of discount cash flows. But the idea with old-fashioned, traditional valuation is that earnings growth drives valuation, right? And now I've seen a trend recently in just like, this last decade where we've been seeing a different type of valuation arise with the internet age. And I think it's because we're in this high innovation phase in terms of technology where a lot of companies are doing a lot of investing or a lot of inventing, and then they're not really making a lot of cash flows, but creating immense values, right? We're creating a ton of value. So I've been looking at a lot of acquisitions and seeing the same thing over and over again, and I noticed a pattern where I'm like, hey, listen, what's going on here? All these companies are not having a lot of earnings but having high value. And of course we all hear about it in the news of people getting rich on inventing something really amazing on the internet, and it's becoming big. So I did a little bit of research on this and just kind of looked at like, hey, so it looks like the new way of valuation, it is kind of like, hey, there's a certain application or there's a certain service that somebody's providing, like Facebook or Twitter or WhatsApp or Audible or Instagram did and Skype did, and now there's Uber and Lyft and Get and many more. And the idea is that, what's the idea? Create something that works, right? Have a lot of people use it, and then you have people using it, so that's already a community and an audience that you have. Now, if you have a community and an audience, you might not be making money, but there's this whole thing that I think everybody's using, is this whole Seth Godin thing that talks about marketing and permission marketing and developing trust via relating to communities. And this theory goes that, hey, listen, if you have a large audience and they trust you, whether you're Facebook, Twitter, WhatsApp, Audible, Skype, whoever, and they're using your platform, at some point in time, you could start making offers to this audience, whether it's offers from your company or whether it's offer to buy something that's not from your company. Maybe you're the middleman, something. And then this is just a certain value to it. How do you take advantage of this value? Not an easy answer. Of course, everybody's trying to do that. Everybody's trying to connect to that, but it's not an easily solvable thing, and I think people are doing different things and to varying degrees of success. So my question is, and the discussion here is, how are companies monetizing these technologies or user bases? And if we can get an idea, maybe each one of you can come up with one example of a company that is doing it and provide kind of like how they're monetizing their user base or technology, and do you think it's successful? In other words, I want to give you an example and start with something. I wanted to start with something that we talked last week about, which was Facebook, and talk a little bit about that. So with Facebook, the idea is that I wanted to point you in this direction here at this 12-month trailing PE of 92.78. This means that this valuation that they have of 257 billion is very high because their price is just very high compared to earnings. And then I wanted to point you to this part of key statistics where I noticed the forward PE is 33.26. Now 33.26 is not an unusual PE, and again, this means that their earnings are growing while their valuation is not. In other words, saying that, hey, these earnings are actually catching up to what a company in this industry trades at on an average. So that is an interesting thing, and that's kind of what I'm saying in terms of, hey, Facebook is actually not yet, not this year, definitely not last year, but by the end of next year, the end of 2016, it looks like it will stabilize and monetize all this unbelievable potential we are seeing, and we saw when it IPO'd back in 2012. Biggest IPO ever, I believe, for $50 billion. And that's something to think about, right? Something to think about, and that is reflected in, if we look at analyst estimates, that is reflected in where they're going. That is reflected in where they're going, and this is kind of, you could see end of year 2016 revenue 23 billion, and that's, you can see this company is starting to become a more of a mature company, more of a company that is creating earnings and not just growing fast but actually providing large numbers. And I wanted to also, you know, I'm also interested in this technology. You know, that of course Amazon is growing rapidly with content and selling, but I'm also interested in Uber, if somebody could cover that, as I heard that they're about to IPO in the next month or 2 or 3 months, or early 2016, and people are saying that that will be the biggest IPO ever, and that their current valuation is above $50 billion. So their valuation is actually higher than what Facebook was at the time of IPO. So if somebody could cover that, and maybe look at other companies that are up and coming, that are valuable, and maybe, you know, if you guys could cite some articles or write up a little analysis or look at some PE ratios of something that's already public, and we can go from there. I'm looking forward to discussing this with you, and email me if you have any questions.